And so we've been seduced to play the wrong game, and then we've been seduced to think it should be easy. So when we suffer, like I did as a young man, I thought something was wrong with me. I thought I was the only one who felt overwhelmed, anxious, stressed, and thinking the things I was thinking. So self-compassion 101 comes in, mindset, self-compassion, right? You're not alone. Common humanity. 80 to 90% of us are struggling with anxiety, overwhelm, whatever it is these days. Then you got to know you can do something about it. So we got to go from self-compassion to self-encouragement and believe that you can fundamentally change your life. This is where confidence comes in. So confidence means intense trust, confidere. So intense trust in what? That things will go perfectly? Of course not. That you have what it takes. It doesn't matter what happens.
Hey, this is Ari. Welcome back to the Energy Blueprint podcast. Today is a very special episode. I am interviewing a personal friend of mine, Brian Johnson, who I personally find to be one of the most inspirational and masterful and disciplined and driven human beings on the planet. He's someone who I personally feel very inspired by, and I absolutely love every time I get to have a conversation with him. This podcast is no exception to that. It's absolutely one of my favorite podcasts that I've ever done. He describes himself as 50% philosopher, 50% CEO, and 101% committed to helping create a world in which 51% of humanity is flourishing by the year 2051. This is his new book that just came out a few days ago. It's called Areté, Activate Your Heroic Potential. It is a meaty book of over 1,000 pages, and it is absolutely packed with brilliant gold nuggets of wisdom. Go get this book right now. Don't even wait to listen to this podcast, though there's lots of great stuff in this podcast as well that I think you're really going to enjoy. As I said, it's one of my personal favorites. But don't even wait any longer. Go to Amazon right now. Get this book. This is a rare gem of a book. I don't think it's an overstatement to say this is certainly one of the best books of the last several years, if not last several decades. It's that good and it's that important of a read. So with no further ado, enjoy this conversation with my friend, the brilliant, the inspirational Brian Johnson. Brian, welcome. It is such a pleasure to have you. The last time we connected was at your house outside of Austin, Texas, 2-3 years ago, where you became instantly one of my absolute favorite people in the world. And we've been talking about making this happen now ever since then, 2-3 years now, and it's awesome to finally make it happen.
Ari, it is great to see you. I can feel your soul force from here. My wife's been such a huge fan of you for so long, so it was fun to connect. It's already been 2 to 3 years, dude. That feels like it was 2 to 3 months ago, but
I
yeah.
know.
My wife, we both love you and your wife, and it was so much fun to hang out. So great to be here with you today, and just appreciate you, man.
Absolutely. I don't generally waste time with personal stories and sort of the fluff, but there's a personal story of how we met that I think is worth telling because it's kind of funny. And so basically, we have some mutual friends who my wife and I met down here in Costa Rica, and we happened to be traveling to Texas, to Austin, and they called us up and they said, you have to meet, our friends outside of Austin, and you've got to meet them. And instantly I went, oh no, I got to meet like random people and do the small talk, chit chat stuff, and just that whole process, it was kind of something that I was dreading, but our friends insisted, and so we went and we met your wife and we went for a walk around your property, and you were at the time hiding in your office, basically. What we later found out was
I had the same internal dialogue, by the way.
Exactly. So that's what's funny is both you and I were like, oh no, we got to meet new people and make small talk. I really have important stuff to do. I don't really have time for this. And so we hung out with your wife for a while, for a couple hours, and then finally, like as the day was winding down, we were in your house, and then you came out of your office, and we started talking. We had a great conversation, and you said something to the effect of, "Man, if I knew how cool you guys were, I wouldn't have been hiding in my office this whole time."
Soul brothers
That's
from,
right.
from before we met.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, that is a fantastic story. I'm sweating with laughter already. That is so good.
And there's one more aspect to this that was interesting because I think it was maybe 6:30 p.m. It was just around sunset, and you said something like, "Okay, well, we got to wind down for bedtime," and I started laughing because I thought you were joking, and you were like, "No, I'm serious. We actually go to bed really soon," and that's when I was like, uh, "What time do you wake up in the mornings?" And you said, I don't know what time it was. You wake up at like 4:30 in the morning or something to start your morning routines and your work day and all this kind of stuff. And that's when I realized you are the single most disciplined and just all in committed person that I have ever seen in my entire life. And
Wow.
it's true. And I know a lot of, high performance, very successful people, but I have never met someone with your level of commitment and drive and discipline. People talk about me as being those things, and I was like, you should meet Brian Johnson because he puts me to shame in that regard. So with that, that's sort of like what I want the listeners to know about you as a person. You are like, you walk the walk more than I think anybody, I would imagine anybody on the planet, or you're in the running for first place, certainly.
I appreciate that so much. And again, so funny and fun that we had the same inner dialogue. And I didn't realize it was that long that you guys were here. So my apologies for that. Back in the day, too, I was even more bubble wrapped. Then it was like, no, I read, I write, I think, I repeat, no interruptions in these time frames.
Mhm.
But then I think it must have been winter. But and it's funny too, because of course you inspired us with a lot of that wisdom in terms of just light therapy and getting our energy dialed in and really taking care of our mitochondria. And we're so simple, and we're so deliberately kind of iconoclastic. And look, last night the time just changed. So last night I went to bed late, which was 8 p.m.
Mhm.
Usually I go to bed like at 7 p.m., but that's an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes after the sunset in Austin. And
Yeah.
there's just no scenario, as the winter approaches, that we were out hanging out, partying, under what? The dark skies at night. So, um, but I appreciate you. I so enjoyed our connection, and I'm so inspired by you, just feeling your presence, your wisdom and your discipline and just your brightness is really inspiring for me. So bless you. Thank you for your kind words.
Thank you, brother. There's one more piece of the story I realized I just left out. Right about as we were about to meet, our friend said, "Oh, it's Brian Johnson," and I said, "Wait, Brian Johnson from Philosopher's Notes?" And she goes, "Yeah," and I was like, "Oh, I've been following that guy's work for like over 10 years." And I used to listen when I was a personal trainer in my 20s. I used to listen to his Philosopher's Notes, 20-minute audio summaries for listeners, 20-minute audio summaries of all these different personal development and success and happiness books. Like, I know who Brian Johnson is. Are you kidding me? I get to meet Brian Johnson. That's awesome. And then shortly before we met, you and your wife discovered that you knew who I was too, because you had read my book on red light therapy, and you were trying to interview me and that kind of stuff. So we kind of discovered beforehand or during that we knew each other already. So that was pretty cool as well.
Super cool, man. Life is
So
good. You guys need to come back, by the way. We were excited there for the flirting of, wait, we might be close, but longer chat. Love the prelude and too funny.
so let's get into this. Right at the time we met, you were launching Heroic, basically. I mean, you were showing me the mock-ups for the website and the app, and it wasn't even public facing yet. You had a big tattoo on your arm, Heroic, and
That
it
hasn't
was
gone away.
and you were in the process of all that. So you've now launched this new brand. You've moved out of the Philosopher's Notes brand, and it became Optimize, and then now it's Heroic. So tell everybody about why Heroic. Where did this brand come from?
Yeah, so I appreciate you talking about the Philosopher's Notes. I spent half of the last 25 years as a founder CEO. So I built two social platforms before Facebook. And then when I wasn't doing that, I was reading, writing, thinking, teaching, repeating. I distilled over 600 books, ancient wisdom, modern science, into those philosophers' notes. And then we integrated that into a coach certification program that 10,000 people have gone through from 100 countries. But basically, I'm a hermit. So when you came out, dude, I was seriously bubble wrapped. All I did was read, write, teach, repeat. Read, write, teach, repeat. And then on election night 2020, politics aside, we've been blessed to serve people at the highest levels of both parties. Just woke up and I had waited 18 years for somebody to create an alternative to Facebook. The platform that I had built preceding Facebook, that John Mackey, CEO of Whole Foods, invested in and nearly bought, died a sad death when I sold it to a different publicly traded company. 250,000 people were in this social platform trying to make a difference in the world before Facebook. So I literally waited 18 years for someone to create an answer to the social dilemma, that great documentary on the unintended catastrophic consequences of social platforms built, hacking your attention. Longer chat. Anyway, election night, I woke up and I'm like, look, we can do better. And in that moment, it was one of those epiphanal moments where I realized I'm going to do it. I'm going to do my best to create a platform that can help people move from theory to practice to mastery together using the best of social and persuasive technology for the best. Long story slightly shorter, that company is called Heroic Public Benefit Corporation. We wound up making history as the first company to ever raise $5 million via the crowdfunding regulations. We actually raised 10 million. People were so excited to help us create that platform. We built it with the same company that built Slack, Tinder, and Uber Eats. And that's right when you came, is right when we were going to launch that. And that's now a long kind of overview of what's going on with that. And that's what we've been focused on for the last couple of years before the book.
And why heroic? What's significant about heroes and heroic?
So I'm going to rebrand what the word heroes mean, heroic, and what the word hero means. So in ancient Greece, I'm kind of an etymology nerd, in ancient Greece, the word that they picked for hero didn't mean tough guy or a killer of bad guy or anything like that. The word hero etymologically means protector. So a hero is a protector. A hero has strength for two. They move from victim to creator to hero to make a difference in the world. And the hero's secret weapon is love. And the way I like to frame it up is my wife is more heroic than me. I get all the public accolades because I'm front facing, but she's extraordinary for 101 reasons. And so redefining what it means to be heroic, and the idea that you, whoever's listening to this, you're the hero we've been waiting for. Quit looking outside yourself. And so my life's work is all about helping activate the heroic potential within the individuals we serve. And I have our mission tattooed to my body, which is to help create a world in which 51% of humanity is flourishing by the year 2051, inspired by Martin Seligman and the positive psychology movement. But that's the basic idea: is you're the hero we've been waiting for. Let's move from theory to practice to mastery together. Very importantly, the fastest way to change your life is to join a community of people with high standards. So the integration of all those ideas is what we're all about.
Speaking of integrating ideas, you spent many years in the brand Philosopher's Notes, where you were doing summaries. I think it was 6-page or 3-page PDF summaries, and then audio summaries, and sometimes also video summaries of, or maybe always video summaries, I don't remember. I would always listen to the 20-minute audio summaries of hundreds and hundreds of personal development books on happiness, on purpose, on human flourishing, positive psychology, on Eastern philosophy, on ancient Greek philosophy, on spirituality, on Buddhism, on so many different topics. And I'm curious, and I know this is maybe a hard ask, but it relates to the work that you're doing now. How do you best sort of congregate these ideas or reconcile them, or sort of like make sense of all of these different things, create some kind of a synthesis of all of these things? Because I know that was part of the heroic vision as well, is to kind of move away from just creating, hey, okay, here's access to 5,000, book summaries and audio summaries here, and more towards like, here's a simple, coherent framework to implement in your life.
Yeah, that's exactly goosebumps what I've spent, again, the better part of the last 25 years trying to figure out. So ancient wisdom, modern science is kind of how I frame it up. And then, of course, all the self-development that leans on some of each of those elements. But that's been my obsession to understand what all of the great teachers have said across all cultures, across history, that modern science has validated, and then live it, to move from theory to practice in my own life, and then to figure out a practical framework through which individuals can simplify the whole process and truly fundamentally change their life. So we've done a lot of research on our platform, and there are 7 objectives that I've seen, that we've used to, like you said, congregate, aggregate, make a coherent, practical application and synthesis of all that wisdom, which our coach program is based on, the book is based on, and we've been told it works. It's just I've been told that I'm pretty good at simplifying complex things and then finding the through line, and then most importantly, helping you figure out how you're going to idiosyncratically apply it to your life. But the first, I mean, so then the other arm is tattooed with Areté, right? And the book is called Areté because that's the one word summation of what every single one of those ancient wisdom philosophers and faith traditions and modern scientists have to say about how to live a good life. So if you asked the ancient Stoics how to live a good life, Aurelius, Epictetus, Seneca, who are my favorite, kind of flavor of ancient wisdom, they'd answer you in a single word. They'd say Areté, live with Areté. We translate the word as virtue or excellence, but it means something closer to being your best self, moment to moment to moment. And I like to say, if this is what you're capable of being, and there's a gap between who you could have been and who you're actually being, it's in that gap in which your regret, anxiety, disillusionment, depression exists. On one level, it's more nuanced than that, of course. On another, it's that simple. When you close the gap and you express the best version of yourself and you live with Areté, you experience what the ancient Greek and Stoics described as the summum bonum, the greatest good of life, eudaimonia, a deep sense of joy and flourishing. So that's the one word summation of all of my work. And then there are also 7 objectives. I know that we have an affinity for the second one, forging anti-fragile confidence. But that's kind of the way I've framed it up. And again, this is my obsession. It's what I've spent. Why I didn't come out of my office when you came to when I was done with that day's work is I've just been really working hard on myself, on the craft, and trying to be worthy of being in a position to hopefully lead a movement of people passionate about these ideas who can truly change the world together.
Yeah, beautiful. So I have your book here. Thank you for sending me this. I have some thoughts on it. First of all, it's like 1,000 pages long. And I don't say 1,000 pages as an exaggeration. It is literally 1,000 pages long. I'm saying this to the listener. I know you know how long your book is, but like, just so people know, I'm not actually exaggerating when I say it's 1,000 pages. It's literally 1,000 pages. So this book is something approximating, and forgive like a religious reference here, I don't mean it in that sense, but it's something approximating the Bible in the sense that this is so rich with wisdom. It's almost unbelievable that you packed all of this into one book and that you didn't decide to like make it into 5 books or something, like, because it easily could be. It's amazing. And I've only started reading it about a week ago, and it's just truly amazing how much good stuff is packed into this. So first of all, well done on this. And to everybody listening, this book is the absolute real deal. Go to Amazon, go to Barnes and Noble, wherever you buy books, go grab yourself a copy of this book right now. It's amazing. It's brilliant. It's life-changing if you read this and you apply it. So like, no question about it. My highest possible endorsement that I could give. Now, you mentioned these 7 objectives that you talk about in the book. The first one is know the ultimate game. And you say in the book that it's important to make sure that you're playing the right game, and that in such a profoundly sick society, most of us probably aren't playing the right game. So let's talk about what you mean by that.
Yeah, and again, just to rewind for a moment, thank you. I appreciate your kind words very, very much. And as we were joking before we came on, I had 70% of a normal non-pejoratively, but kind of fluffy book, a 250, 300 page book. And I'm like, that's not the book I want to write. So the book is 1,000, I think 26 pages to be precise. But it's 451, which is the number of degrees Fahrenheit you need to get to ignite a fire and hit activation energy. 451 micro chapters, 1, 2, 3 pages long, on the best ideas I know that I hope can help change people's lives. But they're organized in 7 objectives. The first objective is you got to know the ultimate game. And this is the thing that all the ancient wisdom, again, philosophers and wisdom and faith traditions say across the span. You can have the choice of Hercules 2,500 years ago that Socrates talked about, the Stoics talked about, or how about the Bhagavad Gita? Slightly more, not quite 2,500 years ago. But what's the Bhagavad Gita? The Bhagavad Gita is a reluctant warrior, Arjuna, being counseled by his god, Krishna. He doesn't want to go to war. The war is a metaphorical representation of the war within himself between vice and virtue. And again, we can talk about all the different contexts in which all the great teachers have said, you gotta know the ultimate game, and you gotta play it well. David, more modern, style. He says, look, you get to the first mountain. In the second mountain, his great book, you get on the top of the first mountain. You did everything you were told to do. You chased all the right things, in quotes, but you get up to the top of that mountain, you look around, you're like, I'm not happy, I'm not fulfilled. And the reason is because we've been seduced to play the wrong game, to chase fame, wealth, and hotness. And scientists say, even if you are successful in pursuit of fame, wealth, and hotness, you are, quote, and I get goosebumps every time I say this, you're, quote, less psychologically stable, even if you're successfully pursuing them, than people who are predominantly focused on the intrinsic motivators, the simple things of life, being a better person, deepening relationships, and making a contribution, not to impress people with your Instagram followers or square footage in your house, but just to do the right thing, to live with virtue and be your best self. So that's the ultimate game. The other fun metaphor I like to use is a journey of 1,000 steps begins with a journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. But if your first step is in the wrong direction, the faster you go toward that destination, the further away you get from where you really want to go. So slowing down, taking a breath, and checking in and saying, in a world in which 80% of us are struggling with anxiety and depression, and nearly the same are struggling with weight issues or chronic disease, as Krishnamurti says, it is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. And that's objective 1. You got to know the ultimate game and how to play it well. And that's life-changing for people when they slow down and they see that. It's so obvious when I say it out loud, but when you slow down and see it and then start architecting your life in accordance with those ideas, things change.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Areté is defined, you said, as something approximating showing up as your best self, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm curious if you have any thoughts on how that sort of reconciles with some of the Eastern philosophical notions around sort of just being, stop trying to get somewhere else other than where you are. Just be you, exist as you are. Stop trying to, we even hear messages from some spiritual gurus like, stop trying to pursue enlightenment, for example, because, it's already there. You just sort of have to relax away all of your pursuits of trying to be something other than you are. So I know this is a big question and maybe not an easy answer. But
dude, I have very strong opinions on that subject. So let's go. We'll go back and forth, but I love the frame. I mean, I think those individuals should talk to Buddha. I think if the Buddha was alive today and we can watch what he did, mm-hmm. how unbelievably relentlessly hard he worked to attain his enlightenment. I mean, what the Buddha did to attain enlightenment is truly astonishing. He makes me and you look like we're sitting still. Look at what Gandhi did. I mean, Gandhi's level of self-discipline to reduce himself to zero was such a heroic effort, it's not even funny. The Buddha meditated after he reached enlightenment, after he worked as hard as he did to reach that enlightened state. So we can frame this up through Hinduism, Buddhism, and then we'll go to Confucianism, talk about Chinese philosophy, because they say similar things, but I think there's a lot of misunderstanding related to what you're talking about. Near the end of the book, I talk about the ego, and there's just different definitions for it, but some of the unhealthiest people in the world are those who have disassociated from their ego prematurely. You can't let go of something you never had hold of. So that's a longer chat. But in Buddhism, the ideal that I aspire to is the bodhisattvic ideal, where I work tirelessly to build my bodhicitta, my enlightened mind, such that what? I can attain my own enlightenment for its own sake? No. So I can return with open hands to the marketplace, back to the world, and help others reduce their suffering. That's hard work. That's arduous work. And again, longer philosophical chat. I respect different perspectives, but I feel strongly about that. Gandhi, his discipline, his moral integrity and moral courage is astonishing what he did. And then you have the ancient Chinese philosophers, Lao Tzu, Confucius, etc. Their whole idea was wu wei. So wu wei, you translate W-U-W-E-I, right? Wu wei, you translate as effortless action. And I talk about this a lot lately, but when I first heard that, I'm like, oh, so I should just not do anything? That's what that means? No. It's effortless right action. You effortlessly show up as your best self. Now, they had different approaches to get there. So Lao Tzu was, no, just let it all go and just be yourself, be fully, quote, wild and kind of untamed and all those things, and you can reach that state of effortless perfection. I'm more Confucian. Confucius was, no, you better discipline yourself and know exactly what you need to do when, such that you can polish all the rough edges out and boom, you are that best version of you. But there's a neuroscience to that. In a great book called Trying Not to Try, on how hard it is to get to a point where you don't need to try, they talk about when an individual gets to that point of living with wu wei, effortless best, which again is Areté and eudaimonia, by the way, just to make that connection. It's just the Chinese Eastern expression of what we're talking about from the West. You have what they call DE. You have moral charisma, this power about you that people can feel. And we are neurologically wired to feel people who are living in integrity with their highest values, which is why the ancient Chinese philosophers who taught the leaders who wanted to be that person, because that's how you lead. And Gandhi called that soul force. His satyagraha, we mistranslate it as nonviolent resistance. It means truth force, virtue force, love force, soul force. Martin Luther King quoted him, soul force, in I Have a Dream, his I Have a Dream speech. But anyway, it's my belief that that requires wisdom and discipline in order to get to a point where you are a conduit to something bigger than yourself. And we can talk about it a lot more, and I'd love to because it's such a fun topic. But those are my quick thoughts on it with respect to the, varying perspectives, et cetera. There you go.
Yeah, beautiful answer. I'm wondering also, there's kind of this, there's a sort of counterintuitive aspect of willpower and effort versus non-effort. So what I mean by that is, one of my mentors, who I know you're friends with as well, is John Assaraf, and I was walking with him on the beach a few days ago, and we were talking about behavioral change, and someone who makes choice, who's trying to lose weight, for example, and how much effort and willpower is required for them to maybe not go for the potato chips or the ice cream, but to choose healthier food instead. And how at the beginning that takes an enormous amount of effort, but you get to a certain point where it's actually easier, it's less effort to choose the healthier option than it is to choose the unhealthy option. So for me, for example, it's easier to choose healthier options. I know it is also for you, because we have so much negativity linked. We know the results, the long-term results of not taking the right action. So it becomes easier to take the right action, plus the habit is ingrained. And I feel like that also kind of links up with this idea of
100%.
Effortless action.
Yeah. And this is we can drill it down into our brainstem. 250 million years ago, we developed the basal ganglia, which is the part of our brain that basically has us do us. What you repeatedly do becomes wired in your consciousness at the most basic fundamental level. So you're exactly right. If you have a habitual way of being, you're going to continue to be that way until you decide, I'm going to live from a different identity. I'm going to reshape my mind with inner size, with John's work, and with what you do. But that requires effort. That requires the discipline to create those new neural pathways. And at the most fundamental level, you get to a point where literally it's harder to do the things that you do naturally now. And the ancient Stoics talked about this too. Seneca said, how much do a straight course where doing what is best for you is what you most enjoy. But it requires pertinacity was the word that he used, and discipline. You need to show up and you need to do it. But then it becomes easier and easier and easier. And that this is the fifth objective in the book is master yourself, in which I talk about the art and science of behavioral change. And I talk about BJ Fogg, James Clear's Atomic Habits, and all the other guys and women. But he makes a really important point, because where most people get it wrong is they think something's wrong with them. They think they have a character flaw. Because you have failed to install this habit and that habit and this habit, and now you have this addictive behavior, et cetera, you want to give up because you think something's wrong with you. You have a character flaw. He says, no. It's a design flaw. You haven't been taught behavioral design because it's actually not that complicated. To install and delete habits, you need to do 3 things to install, as how I teach it, and 3 things to delete habits. And when you practice that, the same way you'd practice a musical instrument or a martial art or a language you want to learn, you get better at it. But we're not taught how to do that. And it's insanely important that we teach the next generation and ourselves to do it, because willpower, discipline, outpredicts everything for everything you want in your life. And you can cultivate it. Longer chat we can have on that, but I feel so passionately about it. And it's exciting. And this is life-changing. When you realize it's not you, you've been playing the wrong game, it's supposed to be hard. Oh, and I can simplify the whole thing. And this is how I do it. Then it becomes fun. And these aren't chores you're checking off a list. They're gifts you're giving to yourself, which is the other difference between me and you and the old version of ourselves. Look, I used to order, buy 1 pizza, get 1 free. I'd have 1 pizza for dinner and the next one for breakfast. I felt that way. I wanted to end my own life 25 years ago. I had none of these skills that we're talking about now. I have felt the depths of despair and that pain, and I've built the scaffolding in my life where I have ups and downs as we all do, but I'm never going there. And now I can help people and show them the breadcrumbs that I kind of followed to get to a point of just deep joy. And it's what we do with our kids. And I'll wrap this up, but we tell our kids, make the connection. We've been blessed. They've never had an antibiotic. 11 and 6, they like feeling good. When they get a little bit sick, make the connection. Oh, that sugary food and this, and that, and they don't like that. And when we make the connection between this and that, we bring joy to the process and give ourselves the gift of well-being with each choice that we make. And oh, by the way, that's Areté. So in any given moment, what would your best self do? Are they going to do this? Are they going to do that? And again, we don't need to be perfect, but even getting 3, 5, 10% better in that, you change your life. Then you aggregate and compound it, and things become a lot more fun in the process.
Mm-hmm. You've been talking lately on occasion about mitochondria. I've been pleasantly surprised to see you talking about mitochondria, and that's obviously something I've been talking about for many, many years now, and is very central to the work that I do at the Energy Blueprint. You talk also about this term called zest, and how that is often referenced in the scientific literature, and is one of the, well, you know what, maybe I'll let you explain the importance of zest. So why is it that you talk so much about zest? What is this term all about?
Well, I appreciate your wisdom. I mean, you've influenced me and my family with your wisdom on the power of those powerhouses, mitochondria within every cell in our body, and get them right. And thank you, Mom. And let's go, right?
Yeah.
But so again, ancient wisdom we've talked a lot about. Modern science, the positive psychology movement was founded studying all the ancient wisdom traditions we just talked about. Literally, the Judeo-Christian Islamic traditions, the ancient Greeks, Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, Confucianism, they all say the same thing. Be a good person in service to something bigger than yourself. Live with virtue. Now, they identified the virtues most highly correlated with one's flourishing or well-being. Those virtues include things that you'd expect, like hope and gratitude. those are tied for second. It's impossible to be simultaneously depressed and grateful. Now, again, in any given moment, it's more nuanced than that, but in any given moment, you can take things for granted or as granted. And if you can find things to be grateful for, you're going to feel better in that moment. Hope, science behind that. And then there's things like love, which is obviously so essential, curiosity, being open to life, having that discipline we talked about, and courage, etc. Somewhat surprisingly, most highly correlated, and not surprisingly when you actually think about it, most highly correlated with your flourishing is, they call it zest, but a sense of vitality, a sense of enthusiasm for life. So I've been saying forever that your physiology drives a lot more of your psychology than you may think. And again, this, you know this, but the science is catching up from a traditional positive psychologist view. But it's everything. You know, we have to start with our energy. We have to optimize that through what we describe as the basic fundamentals: eating, moving, sleeping, breathing, and focusing your attention. And as you do that, your life changes. And the psychological challenges you've been facing are mitigated. The intensity of your challenges, the frequency of your challenges. Again, 80 to 85, 90% of our serotonin is produced in our gut. That's an astonishing fact that your psychiatrist should know and should be prescribing a healthy diet. Stop drinking your sugar. Stop eating the refined foods, and we'd be able to change your psychology. Yes. So anyway, zest, vitality, enthusiasm for life coming through those powerhouses within every cell of our body is exciting, because then you can focus on things within your control. It's a lot easier for me to control what I put into my mouth and how I move my body and when I go to sleep than it is figuring out my purpose and figuring out how I'm going to deal with that huge relationship challenge or whatever's going on outside of that, you know?
There's a field of research you might be familiar with. It's called mitochondrial psychobiology. And some of the leading researchers there are Martine Picard and Douglas Wallace. And there's several others in their group. They're sort of the dominant group in this field. And they do lots of interesting experiments where they, for example, subject people to psychological stress and then analyze mitochondrial function, or analyze for the presence of mitochondrial DNA that's leaked into the bloodstream after intense psychological stress, which indicates mitochondrial damage took place. Because mitochondrial DNA shouldn't be floating around your bloodstream, it should be in your cells, in your mitochondria. So what this field of research has shown very conclusively is that there is a very strong, powerful link between our mind and our mitochondria. And those two things are interacting all the time. They're in communication. What's going on in the mind affects our mitochondria within seconds. What I'm curious to hear from you, given how deep you've gone in personal development and psychology and purpose and human flourishing, and all of this work you've been doing for so many years, and the work you're doing with Heroic, is how you see this relationship between purpose, between Areté, showing up as your best self in life, you know, wanting to feeling driven to work on yourself, or feeling driven to develop bodhicitta, to become a bodhisattva, and kind of having that energy, versus somebody who is lacking in purpose, lacking in meaning, lacking in this sort of sense of like, there's ikigai, sort of like, I have a reason for being, there's something important I'm here to do. How do you see that stuff, which is the center of your work, matching up with physical energy levels and zest?
Yeah, I see it as unbelievably foundational. And just to close the loop on what you were saying, so you were talking about, and I can't wait to read your book with all this stuff and get all the other references you recommend. I read books, so I cannot wait to digest yours and share your wisdom in your next book. But yeah, the mind affects your mitochondria. But what I'm more interested in, frankly, is your mitochondria affecting your mind. Because it's a lot easier for me, my own personal experience, to get better and better at making choices about what food I put into my body than what thoughts I allow to continue to circulate in my head. And even for me, I had meditated for years. And again, this is idiosyncratic, and I don't get into the religious zealot discussion on details on nutrition. But for me, when I removed grains, Not only did I not look as pregnant as my wife did, who was 7 months pregnant at the time when we did this, literally all this inflammation went away, etc. I was a really anxious kid, like scared of everything. And I had meditated for years and I cultivated a level of reasonable calm, confidence, but I'd still have this odd social anxiety that was just so not appropriate in quotes in situations. I removed grains from my diet and that literally was gone. I mean, it was dropped radically. Then I started training my breath more rigorously. And now it's like, of course, you feel the nerves and excitement when you're doing something that you're excited about. But the physiology and the changes I made in my eating and my moving and my sleeping and my breathing, and how radically that impacted my psychology. So the mitochondria going to the mind, I have found to be, again, I'm exaggerating perhaps, 10 times more powerful than the other way. And that's so exciting for me because I can control the eating and the moving and the sleeping. And that's what I've trained our coaches to do. And if I'm carrying extra weight and I'm clearly got some hormonal imbalances from insulin and exercising that control, the downstream psychological benefits that come from optimizing our physiology, and then the clarity that I personally get, me on 6 hours of sleep versus 9 hours of sleep, I see the world differently. There's nothing I can do on 6 hours of sleep to see the world with the same optimism I see it at with 8 to 9 hours of sleep, period. There's no exercise you could ever give me. And I mean that. You can go today, even today, I got 7 hours of sleep, slightly different, pretty good. 6.5 hours of sleep. I just don't see the world the same way with I do as when I have 8.5 hours of sleep. So that's my main lever. Frankly, right there, get an extra hour of sleep a night. Then we'll talk more about your purpose, because then you're going to feel that zest, that vitality, which is for me the conduit to more and more clarity. So it's not either or, but I found both ways to be incredibly impactful personally and in the work that we do.
Yeah, well, this is strange for me to sort of push back on you here because the work that I do is what you're describing. This is what I'm talking about is physiological energy production. This is what I teach. And so I teach people how to get their physiology producing lots of energy at the cellular level, at the level of neurochemistry, hormones, all of these things dialed in. Having said that, and this it's kind of interesting that me being the one who does this work to be pushing back on you in this instant, but I think your perception of it is that case because you are coming at it as an individual who already had so much of the mind stuff and purpose and the personal development stuff dialed in, and then you came to the health stuff second.
Maybe
that you discovered like, whoa, this stuff is way more powerful. But I actually think like there's a demographic of people that are the exact opposite of that. So that are maybe not the exact opposite, but people who are maybe physically in decent health, maybe they've been working at eating a good diet for several years. They're on an exercise regimen. They're following certain healthy habits. They're seeing a functional medicine doctor. They're doing those protocols for detox, whatever. And yet maybe they work a job they hate. And
no. So I'm not saying either or. So let's just
no. And I don't mean to argue with you, but I'm just saying that there's a demographic of people for whom I think they will actually find that the purpose stuff, the stuff you talk about in your book.
I got you. But that's because they've done. But I want to emphasize, you're right, of course. I'm not trying to, and I tried to caveat it where it's not either or. So it goes both ways. And clearly I'm influenced by my own personal experience on it.
Yeah.
And I would offer that the individuals you're talking about have hit the 80-20 on physiology such that now we need to go to the psychology. But look, Chris Palmer's work with brain energy?
Sure.
So the one story that he tells, and that to me is the most powerful book I've ever read. It used to be Matthew Walker's Why We Sleep. It's the one book I recommend I have our coaches read, Why We Sleep, right? And the odds of you being able to get by on less than 7 hours of recommended sleep are the same of your odds of being struck by lightning in your lifetime, 1 in 11,000. So me helping people get 1 extra hour of sleep changes so much of their psychology. It's insane. I've done this, and you've done it too, but I've done that thousands and thousands and thousands of times. But Chris Palmer tells a story about a woman who is psychotic. Every single thing that could possibly be wrong was wrong with her. Just a tragic story of trauma and institutionalization and schizophrenia and horrific life situations. Who, for some reason, went to Duke to do some ketogenic thing for her weight because she was also obese. In the process of getting her insulin regulated and losing the weight, all of her psychological problems resolved in weeks. Goosebumps. I mean, just insane. And of course, that's been done over and over and over again. Now, she was worked on forever psychologically. And I love John and I love inner size. She's not inner sizing her way to finding a meaning of a life of pure joy and meaning. You have to go at least both ways. And so I think it's what Aristotle talks about. For some people, it's more this. For some people, it's more that. And together, that yin and yang, if you will, yang, if you will, of coming together. But I've seen it so many times and have been so moved by that. And that's easier. It's easier to get someone to, we demand our coaches get to a waist to height ratio of 0.5. It's the number one predictor of your morbidity. And it's also going to be the number one predictor of your psychological stability from my vantage point. Having said all that, I'm happy to talk about what we do in order to forge anti-fragile confidence, because that mindset is essential. And we're also very good at that. But even that's driven by consistency on your basic fundamentals, getting both the physiological benefits of your physiology driving your psychology and the psychology of being the type of person who does what they say they will do. Then you get a virtuous cycle up. Again, I really appreciate this and I'm excited to go back and forth and want to emphasize, to me, it's not either or, but I do think the physiology is foundational. I would actually still say that. I don't think you can psych yourself up mind-wise with all the other things not working.
I agree with you.
And at the very least, you would certainly accelerate the growth if you found a pathway to both, you know?
Yeah, I totally agree. It's foundational. This is such a funny moment for me. I'm just sort of observing this as what I do is teach the physiology of energy and health. And for me, you're like the master of mindset and Areté and personal development and showing up as your best self and purpose and human flourishing. And I'm sitting here saying to you, like, talk to me about why that stuff is the big key. And you're like, no, what you're doing is the big key. And I'm like, no, wait, what you're doing is the big key.
Ari,
of course, both are super important.
Dude, if I did what I did 25 years ago, I'd still want to kill myself.
Yeah.
To put it directly. If I ate what I ate, if I moved never, and if I slept the way I did, I probably wouldn't be alive. I would either be dead by my own hand or from some chronic disease. Yeah. And the truth of that for me and what I've seen is so fundamental that I would be a circus. So I'm again, I am the guy that I am, and I train the way that I do, and I do the things that I do because I know that pain and I know the scaffolding I've built in my life, and you couldn't pay me to not do the things I do, eating, moving, sleeping, breathing, and focusing in that order for me. And it's just so exciting. And again, it's you and your kind of group of individuals who have really brought me into that. And that's why I'm so bullish right now in this conversation, even of, dude, 80% of my psychology, at least 90% is driven by this. I'll tell you what, if I was up late last night, binge, I never drank. My dad drank enough. His dad drank enough for me, you know, my brother. But if I was up late last night and I got 5 hours of sleep, dude, I'm not inner-sizing my way to purpose and meaning and joy. I'm just not. I meditate this morning for 30 minutes. It's 15 to 60 minutes a day. But dude, I'm on my cushion. I'm just exhausted. Good luck. I'm not connecting to something bigger than myself. So again, it's yes and always. But I'll tell you again, this is where I think the spiritual aspirants get it wrong, to put it directly. Mm-hmm. I think that, and I watched a guy I won't name talk to an individual in one of the, you know, kind of enlightened circles. And the guy was clearly obese, you know, just was not physically healthy, hunched over and was talking about esoteric ideas. And I wish I could have reached through the screen and helped the individual get some clarity on their basic fundamentals. Let's get their eating, their moving, their sleeping, their underlying physiology right, because these abstract ideas at some level aren't helpful. Yeah. We need to demonstrate that level of wisdom and discipline and clean the systems, the mitochondria that allows us to connect to the divine impulse. And so this is, again, why I'm pushing so hard is, but it's exciting because we can do these things. And then boom, in my experience, there's a natural effervescent spirituality and enlightenment and purpose and clarity and meaning that comes from that zest that makes my job as well. My job is this, dude. I'm talking to the US men's national soccer team tonight before they play their game in Austin tomorrow. Now I'm talking to their head coach and assistant coach about what we're talking about right now. Them dominating their aura score. I'm trading aura scores with the head coach right now. You know, all right, boom, look at you. You just went up that last meal 3 to 4 hours before you go to bed. Doesn't that affect your resting heart rate, your HRV, your recovery index? Oh, that's fun, isn't it? Couple tiny little levers. You want to win the World Cup? We got to pull a lot of those little levers. But I love it, dude. And again, admire you and appreciate you, and realize I didn't go where you wanted to go with the
like you're not going to get any disagreement from me about the stuff you're saying. I realize the importance of this work. I mean, this is what I've been doing since I've been 13 years old, is the science of human health. And that's what I do for a living. So I completely agree. And rather than sort of an or in antagonism to what you're describing, I do think there's an element that you're so dialed in on the psychology at this point that I think the big needle movers are the physical stuff. And I think there's a subset of people that are just like, they're in terrible relationships.
Let's go there.
Jobs
go there.
They don't love, they don't have a sense of purpose in their life. And there's that subset of people that no matter how much more they optimize their nutrition or their exercise routine, they're fundamentally in a place where they don't feel a strong motivation to even be alive, a sense of like a reason for existing.
Let's go there. So again, I love it, and I appreciate you pushing, and I don't feel antagonistic at all. I feel this is a fun, intellectual and practical kind of, we call it pancreation, kind of the ancient full strength, their version of like, you know, wrestling and whatnot, but intellectually and respectfully and just getting stronger in the process. Yes, I would still go to those people and I would encourage them to go next level on all of those things.
Agreed.
And that will increase their ability to get clarity. But then it's the idea that I think we both love the most, at least in my work, which is anti-fragile confidence. And before that, even, it's targeted thinking. So the thing that I come back to with everyone we train is, what do you want? So what do you want in your life? And for most people, that's a very, very, very difficult question to answer because they're so busy creating and synthesizing and digesting all the inputs, all the social media posts, all the digital news. And just when you thought our world couldn't get any worse, the last 45 days happened. Just heartbreaking tragedy after heartbreaking tragedy. And oh my God, my kids, you look at the self-harm and suicide ideation and suicide among the next generation, which you can correlate at least to the social media, the iPhones, the screen time, et cetera. But stepping back, asking yourself what you want. And then again, in our practical philosophy, we look at the energy, the work, and the love that the individuals can show up in, and we help them get clarity on what they want: energy, work, and love, what their ideal vision would be in 3-5 years. It's a best selves exercise. It's the fastest way to boost your hope, purpose, and meaning is to imagine yourself 5 years from now. I do this obsessively. Every single day, I journal for 3 to 5 minutes to get my consciousness clear on what I want in my life. And then I direct my actions today in pursuit of that. Now, I quote Iron Man psychologically any day of the week because I've trained for so long. So people who haven't trained and haven't asked themselves what they want in their lives, and if their current lives are in integrity with that, need to do the hard work to start building the clarity. And you only get that through repetition after repetition after repetition. But then we start chipping away at the things that aren't in integrity with our highest lives. And we build that deep sense of trust that is what confidence means. Deep, deep trust that you can handle whatever life throws at you. You can create an ideal relationship. What would that look like for you? And who do you need to be? You can create the ideal work environment. What is it you aspire to do? And what do you need to do to get to that point? And then we can break down the science of hope, which is one of my favorite things, which I practice all of that as hard as I do the other stuff. In combination to where you wanted to take us, then you're frankly you're as close to unstoppable as you're going to get. And I don't use the word enlightened. It's not really my thing, but you can activate your heroic potential. You can feel a deep sense of eudaimonic, grounded, calm confidence, energized tranquility, meaning, and purpose. And there's a ton of things we can talk about how to help people get that clarity. But we're fully aligned. And thank you for letting me indulge in preaching to the, you're not the preacher, to use your religious metaphor.
Preaching to the choir.
I was raised Catholic. I'm preaching to the Pope right here. So pardon me for.
No, it's beautiful. Of course, I agree with everything you said. So it's great. It's a bro fest. I'm loving on the personal development stuff and the idea of Areté as being super important. And you're like, hey, just as central to this whole thing, showing up as your best self, the foundation of it is like the stuff you've been talking about and the stuff you teach around physical health and energy, and bringing that to the forefront. So, we're totally on the same page. I have so much more on my list here. You've mentioned anti-fragility a couple of times. I know that's something I flagged before this conversation that I said, Brian, we need to talk about anti-fragility. This is, as you know, this is very much the subject of my upcoming book. But I love your thoughts on it. Several months ago, I don't know if it was 6 months ago or something like that, I listened to your Anti-Fragile 101, hour-long lecture on the topic. And I texted you and I was like, dude, this is awesome stuff. You did a phenomenal job. I'm going to even take some of your thoughts from this and put them in my new book because it's so good. Of course, I'm going to credit you. But it's great stuff. I love your thoughts on this topic. And obviously, if I'm writing a book on it, I think it's very much of central importance to health and disease prevention, energy, longevity. So there's different elements of this. You mentioned anti-fragile confidence. There's a physiological anti-fragility, which is the topic of my book. But talk to me about fragility versus resilience versus anti-fragility.
What a wonderful frame. And I remember getting that text from you. I was at the park where my son plays chess on Saturdays, and you sent me the most thoughtful, I'm pretty sure that's where it was. May have been a different set, but you sent me the most thoughtful note about anti-fragility, and I cannot wait to read your book. Goosebumps. We're so excited about your application to anti-fragility as it relates to all the things we're talking about, mitochondrial functioning and flourishing, et cetera. So cannot wait. So I got the word anti-fragile from Nassim Taleb, who coined the word, and he juxtaposes fragility with anti-fragility. And before he named it, there was nothing in our cultural vernacular opposite of being fragile. It's not resilient. So if you're fragile, imagine yourself as a package. You send yourself out in the mail, and if you're fragile, you write, handle me with care. Nothing hard can happen or I'm going to break. Now, all of us are fragile at different times, but none of us want to be fragile. We don't want to break when our relationships have challenges, or our work have challenges, or our health has challenges. We want to get stronger. Now, if you're resilient, you can endure more stress, and then you kind of wear down, then you bounce back faster. That's not the opposite of fragile, though. If you are anti-fragile, on that same package, you write, throw me around, please, because the more you throw me around, the more challenges I face, the stronger I get. Now, the metaphor there would be when you go to the gym, you don't lift styrofoam weights. You lift real weights. Now, of course, you need to find the right, threshold of stress so you don't injure yourself. But we want to approach life's challenges with that mindset, that when life hits me, I get stronger. Those challenges are not something to avoid. They're something to approach. Science 101. You move from a threat response where your underlying physiology is in panic mode to a challenge response when you approach your challenges rather than avoid. So if the ultimate game is to be your best self in service to something bigger than yourself, and I would say activate your heroic potential, then rule number one of that game is it's supposed to be hard. And so we've been seduced to play the wrong game, and then we've been seduced to think it should be easy. So when we suffer, like I did as a young man, I thought something was wrong with me. I thought I was the only one who felt overwhelmed, anxious, stressed, and thinking the things I was thinking. So self-compassion 101 comes in, mindset, self-compassion, right? You're not alone, common humanity. 80 to 90% of us are struggling with anxiety, overwhelm, whatever it is these days. Then you got to know you can do something about it. So we got to go from self-compassion to self-encouragement and believe that you can fundamentally change your life. This is where confidence comes in. So confidence means intense trust, confidere. So intense trust in what? That things will go perfectly? Of course not. That you have what it takes. It doesn't matter what happens. And then I say, if you want to build trust in any relationship, what do you have to do? You have to do what you say you will do. Now we rescheduled this and it was no big deal because we have trust and it was all good and we were moving fast and all that. But if I didn't show up or you didn't show up once or twice, we'd be like, I don't trust this guy, right? And you shouldn't trust me. You shouldn't have confidence in me. Now, if you tell yourself that you will do something and you don't do it over and over and over again, you shouldn't trust yourself. I mean, to be blunt, you shouldn't have high degrees of intense trust or confidence. Stated positively, when you start more consistently, never perfectly, but more consistently doing the little things, eating, moving, sleeping, breathing, being without phones with your kids, you build this trust that's really powerful. And my coach, Phil Stutz, is in the documentary called Stutz with Jonah Hill on Netflix. I've worked with him 400 one-on-one sessions over the last 7 years. In one of the early ones, he complimented me on my emotional stamina. I had no idea what that was, but I'm like, awesome. Next session, what's emotional stamina? And it is what you'd expect it to be. I can handle stress, he says, and I can endure chaos and all these things. But then I said, how do I develop emotional stamina? Which I now call anti-fragile confidence. And this changed my life. He said, the worse you feel, the more committed you need to be to your protocol. So when life hits you, what do? Do you go do the vicious things and all the indulgences and addictive behaviors and kryptonites you shouldn't do? Or in those moments, do you slow down and say, this is one of those moments. I need to double down on my protocol and be my best self, even when I don't feel like it. If you can take that stress and use it to get stronger, then you can forge anti-fragile confidence. The metaphor to conclude that Nassim Taleb uses is, the wind will extinguish a candle, but the same wind will fuel a fire. So the question is, what are you? When life hits you, do you get extinguished and give up and fragile? Or do you literally use it to get stronger? That's my mindset. So now you want to get to the mindset. This is what the most elite coaches and military officers and performers come to me on, and that I push them on. And this is where you complimented me on my discipline. So I walk into any room and I'm, like you said, and at the risk of being immodest, I know I'm at least tied for first. Show me somebody that shows up with more intensity to their protocol, and I'll respect what they do way better than I do, but I can help them go up a degree or two in their intensity on their protocol. It's literally what I'm talking to the men's national team about tonight. Activation, energy, intensity, seizing the moment, all the other things that are required for us to be our best selves. Very long answer to your question, but again, can't wait for your book. And that's kind of my frame on it.
Yeah, beautiful. What's your number one tool or strategy that you focus on, or how do you think of the fundamentals for developing this trait of anti-fragile confidence?
In a word, it is that. It's anti-fragile confidence. The worse I feel, the more committed I am. But in a word, it's consistency. Mm-hmm. So I do the most simple, mundane, basic things with a ferocious consistency. Again, there are exceptions and appropriate exceptions, by the way, to every general principle that we need to be virtuous and flexible and not rigid and break. But I'm consistent. I show up. Then I show up again. And then if I have an off day, which of course I have, I bounce back. Then it's, all right, what's the one thing I need to start doing and the one thing I need to stop doing, which is the way I help people get clarity on their protocol, by the way, is to draw a line down a piece of paper, put do on the upper left, don't on the upper right. Imagine yourself at your best, whether it was a day, a week, a month, a year, or a decade. You at your best. What did you do? Boom. What did you not do? Boom. And then what's the one thing you're currently not doing that you do when you're at your best? You need to start doing that. And then what's the thing you need to stop doing? But it's consistency, and it's an integration of all these things. And in a word, at the risk of being obnoxious, it's Areté. I mean, it's a mantra of mine when I'm meditating. I'll say it to myself when I'm falling asleep. I'm out in the trail. It's Areté, Areté, Areté. It's this opportunity to close the gap, moment to moment to moment, knowing that you're never going to be, as my coach says, exonerated. you're never going to get to a point where you're done. You're always going to have more pain, more uncertainty, more hard work. So then you say, bring it on. And that pain, that discomfort becomes the catalyst to your growth. And the integration of all these ideas, the wisdom, the discipline, the love, the courage becomes more effortless, to use that frame that we discussed. And it becomes more joyful. Very importantly, this isn't a joyless urgency. This is a joyful, wow, this is a gift, this life. And how can I show up as my best self in service to my kids, my wife, my team, you and I right now, for our communities? Gives me tears in my eyes. I mean, it becomes a sacred opportunity, and each moment becomes a true gift that we can give to ourselves and those we love.
Talk to me about Maslow's idea of stepping forward into growth or backward into safety.
This is a bromance. You're hitting all my favorite, absolute favorite ideas. Soul Brothers. I flash back to our kitchen when we're hanging out. So Abraham Maslow, if I was going to summarize my philosophy in a single word, it's Areté. If I was going to summarize it in a sentence, it would be Abraham Maslow's line, what one can be, one must be. So Maslow, humanistic psychologist in the 50s, said that he created the hierarchy of needs. And as you ascend the hierarchy of basic needs, and anyone this far into this chat has done so, not necessarily perfectly, but you now have the ultimate need, which is twofold. He says to self-actualize, but then also to self-transcend. So you become the hero of your own story so that you can become the guide for others and the example for others, the bodhisattva, to use that frame. But he said that in any given moment, you have a choice. You can step forward into growth or back into safety. Forward into growth, back into safety. And you and I demonstrated this in our chat. I could have been less intense. You could have been less intense. We were respectfully pushing, but we stepped forward. And that's what I think made, at least from my vantage point, such a beautiful, rich conversation. So
Agreed.
+1, -1, +1, -1, +1, -1. Now, and you can put that up like this. Was there a gap? Was there a gap? Was there a gap? Was there a gap? On the days where you just didn't close the gap and you went -1, those are the days you want to numb yourself with whatever you do. And we've all got our different numbing agents. But again, stated positively, when you can cobble together more +1s, your life takes on a totally different texture. Maslow also says that every single deviation from what you knew as your best self makes an imprint on your consciousness. And Guzman, he's intense. He says, if you deliberately plan on being less than you're capable of, then I warn you, you will be miserable for the rest of your life. I mean, the intensity with which he taught as a great intellectual, but also just a great kind of pragmatist is powerful. So, but again, stated positively, that's exciting. When you take responsibility, you maintain that agency, and then you do your best, life changes. But that's the +1, -1 that I love as well.
Yeah, I love it. I have a couple more questions for you. One is, given that you are so disciplined, so that you are so just, you're like a man on fire. You're like just so driven and so on it with your mission and with Areté, with being your best self and giving back to the world. How do you relax? And how do you think about taking breaks and spending time with your kids and taking a break from being driven, working and developing yourself and being your best self and helping the world and just going, okay, is it time for me to take a break? Is it time for me to do nothing? Is it time for me to hang out with my family? What is your sort of frame around that?
Yep. So I'm going to share something. Can you see my screen?
I can, yeah.
Okay, cool. So then the only reason I can be this intense on a sustainable level is I train my recovery this hard. So my intensity in my meditation, my intensity in my sleep is as rigorous as everything that you're feeling from me. So my whole thing is energized tranquility. But here's our launch day. So we launched our book yesterday, right? And so the night before we launched our book, I went to bed at 7:20. and my aura score is 90/90. Now, yesterday was, and I was in bed for, and you'd show me your numbers and you'd make me look like I'm at a 2 right now, but I'm
No,
happy
no,
with
no,
that.
no.
The day before I launch a book, we've sold 20,000 copies of the book. We've been hustling right before we launch. And I got a lot going on, but I'm looking at that last meal, boom, let's work your protocol. The more stressed you are, the more committed you are, the more excited you are, the more committed you are. I used to be up and down. Now I don't allow myself to get too excited. Boom, bring it down. So anyway, I'm in bed for 9 hours and 46 minutes before I launched the book, the morning we launched the book. Didn't get a lot of deep sleep that night for various reasons. Then last night I was only in bed for 8 hours, which is less than I like to get. But I work my protocol. So I'm doing the little things. And every morning I meditate for 15, 30, 60 minutes. And before I do so, I put a pulse oximeter on my finger. And this is why I opened it up. And I see how calm and still I can get. So that's 100 oxygen saturation and a 40 resting heart rate. And it's the first thing I do after I wake up. Kids are still asleep. It's whatever it was, 5 o'clock, 4:45 this morning. And I'm seeing how calm I can get. So you're feeling me on the amplitude on the way up, but I train myself to bring myself down. And then there's the obvious things like I'm training, I'm exercising, I'm doing the cold plunge, and it's all the things we talked about. It's eating and the moving and the sleeping and the breathing and the focusing with the same quote intensity on the downside, because you can't maintain this without that. And then family wise, that's always my biggest challenge. Energy and work are very easy for me. Been with Alexander now for almost 17 years. We've got an 11-year-old and a 6-year-old. I'm super proud of how I show up. And that's the area that continues to need more work. But I end my day at a certain time to be with them and to recover. And we go to bed early together as a family. And then the weekends are when I tend to spend more time with my kids, taking my son to a chess tournament, which I talk a lot about in the book. So we're heading out Friday afternoon for a weekend, just the boys. I'll fall asleep holding his hand in the hotel and create those sweet moments. Same thing, up and down. But when you said I'm a man on fire, I thought of Rumi, the great, Sufi mystic. He said, look, what his job was to set himself ablaze. If you're lacking tinder, he says, set yourself ablaze with my fire. Like that idea of, it gives me tears in my eyes, for me to strive to practice my philosophy, to activate what we call your soul force, and to help people do it in their own idiosyncratic ways. But I absolutely rigorous in practicing. That's what the app does, by the way, is we help people get clarity on who they are at their best. I hit 101 targets every single day. The science we've done on our app, we haven't talked about. If you hit one app in our target a day, and that comes as a function of knowing who you are at your best, energy, work, and love, and then what you do when you're at your best. If you hit one target, you're 23% more energized than people who don't. In a randomized controlled study with people who had never heard of Me or Heroic, led by Sony Lyubomirsky, one of the premier well-being researchers in the field. Yeah, the How of Happiness. And she said she'd never seen data in 35 years of research on what she did on our coach program. She would have thought it was fake if she hadn't done it herself, because it's obvious things operationalized, but it's consistency. To go back to that, I don't do it once in a while, and I don't do it when I feel like it. I do it day in and day out, not perfectly, but especially when I don't feel like it. And then cool, life gets a lot easier and we get to focus on the important things,
And that 23% that you're referring to is the result of using the app, having a target, and achieving your target. Which, by the way, I think gets back to our earlier discussion, or earlier back and forth around, kind of purpose, intentionality, goals, reaching goals, and how that ties into this energy story.
100%. You got to know who you are at your best. Be that. That's the ultimate purpose, by the way, that everyone can do. You don't need to know, what your ideal job is in relationship. Make it about you being your best self, independent of that. But we help you get clarity on your identities, etc. And we designed this with the same company that designed Tinder's swipe right, swipe left. So you set up a target. Like I meditated this morning for 11 minutes. I'm in bed for 8 to 9 hours. I had protein. Right now I'm practicing with 2 hours before I get up. After I get up, Gabrielle Lyon, early morning sunlight. I do my burpees. I'll do a PM meditation. I'll do a cold plunge. I just have a breadcrumbed protocol of things that I do when I'm at my best, and I do them. And so I'm hitting all these targets. And again, you set your intention for the day in our app, your attention follows, and then your behavior follows. But yeah, that's the basic idea of I'll hit my targets while we're hanging out of how we built the app to help people move from theory to practice to mastery.
Nice. Tell Gabrielle I said hi if you're meeting with her later. She's
Ah, you
mine as well.
Oh my goodness, I love Gabrielle. Yes, I will.
So last couple things. I'm curious, and this ties into what you were just showing there in your app. What
Yep.
what does your daily routine look like?
Dude, that's actually the best way to show it. I'll just plug this thing in. So, my daily routine begins with committing to being my best self in my app. So we talk a lot. Well, actually, my day began yesterday. So I like to say today began last night. How you ended yesterday, obviously, is going to directly impact the quality of your energy today, which will impact the quality of your productivity and your connection. Um, but basically, this is the app. I showed you some of my energy stuff. Every morning in my work, I strive to show up as a heroic philosopher CEO, which means something to me. I recommit to a vow I created. We have 3,000 investors. It's our public benefit corporation. And then I do the most important thing for our business. And my joke is the new me gets more done before the old me got up. And the most important thing, I do this, strategic visioning for 3 minutes every single day. I'm creative before reactive. I do deep work. We have a social platform we're building. I do that. I work on the book. I'm going to coach people in a few minutes here. I reconnect to our community. I have fun. I crush it. I appreciate the fact teamwork makes the dream work. Practice my philosophy. That's work. And then in love, I'm looking to create micro moments of awesome with my wife and my kids. There's a whole science behind that. Have I kissed my wife? She was 6. We did an air, not sick, but she was like, you don't want to get too close. We just had a big event last weekend. So I gave her an air kiss. I hugged my kids. These are targets I set for myself. Give my kids a hug. It may sound mundane, but my mother-in-law spends part of her time on our property. We've got a tiny house. Right around when you visited, we were testing the app. She didn't know I was using it, but I was committing to certain things, including creating moments with her. Right? I committed in the morning. Now I'm a decent guy, but I tend to be a hermit, focused like you experienced in this 2 hours it took me to come out. Anyway, I'm using the app and committing to doing these things. And she told my wife something's different with Brian. And she had no idea I was using the app. And that was actually the thing that frankly gave and gives me the most confidence in the app. My mother-in-law saw that I was showing up differently, by simply reminding myself of tiny little things that when done consistently can fundamentally change our lives. But those are some of the things that I do on a consistent basis.
What is the ultimate virtue?
Again, at the risk of being obnoxious, Areté is the virtue of virtues, but then wisdom would be the more practical one step below. So wisdom is knowledge of life, but it's also the expression of the proper virtue in the moment in which you need that virtue. So in any given moment, you may need more courage or love or discipline or gratitude or hope or curiosity or zest. So wisdom would be the virtue that kind of helps you put the right virtue into action. And then Areté is kind of the meta sense of, yeah. That's you doing those things. And then the byproduct is that eudaimonia that we talked about.
Beautiful. That was a fast explanation for a big topic I'm sure you could talk about for an hour.
Dude, the first thing we built in our app was a virtue compass. So, we spent $5 million to build this app. And this is the first thing we built because a good life comes down to putting your virtues in action. So we've got all these quotes and virtue declarations and ways to operationalize all these ideas. It's a subject near and dear to my heart. And I just absolutely love the questions you're asking because it shows, again, just the coherence of our thinking and how we're committed to living.
I just realized as you were showing that you showing me that when I was at your house a couple of years ago probably imprinted in my mind, because let me show you the labels of my new supplement line, something that's central to my new brand called Human Optimization that I was brainstorming at the time I was speaking to you. And this is what it looks like. I don't know if you can see that.
Oh my goodness, goosebumps. Look at that. Oh, that's gorgeous.
Okay, so this is the box for my new molecular hydrogen supplement. But every one of the new line of supplement is going to have this dial on it with its own fingerprint, essentially, of you know
Wow.
those arrows, or I don't know what you call them. Those lines are meant to indicate what the supplement is good for of these different things on this dial. So each supplement is going to be, have specific benefits that are indicated right there on the label. So people can kind of figure out, okay, my goals are brain performance or my goals are longevity. What are the specific formulas and ingredients that are useful for that role? But I would bet that you showing me your design elements a couple of years ago probably imprinted somewhere up there and maybe helped
Or
me come
vice
up with
versa,
this.
dude. This is all in the field. I won't name the brand of molecular hydrogen I have on my desk, but I cannot wait to use yours. So we're gonna have some fun
Mine
conversations
just came
around
out,
that.
so I'm not offended. You wouldn't have an opportunity
Oh,
to buy it
dude.
until a few days ago. So
Well, we're gonna have to have that conversation too. Excited to support you on that.
I'll hook you up. Don't worry. So the last thing is, what is the one thing that all heroes have in common, and how do we activate it?
What a beautiful question. A commitment to something bigger than themselves, unquestionably, dedicating their lives to that thing, whether it's, our kids or our family or our team or the community or the world or the environment, whatever it is. A hero isn't a victim. A hero isn't complaining about all the challenges in life. They're just not criticizing, complaining, gossiping, all these things. The cynicism, the cynicism, the nihilism. We've got to move from victim to creator, and dedicate our lives to something bigger than ourselves. The conduit, by the way, is what do I want? That's how you move from victim to creator. If you're complaining, something's missing in your life. That's okay, of course, but what do you want? What would a more noble and virtuous world look like? Then how will you play your role well to help create that world? And then we come back to our chat around the discipline. Then the source of my strength and my discipline is I'm all in. I deeply care about this life that I have and serving those that I've been blessed to serve. It gives me tears in my eyes. And then you go do all these things. That purpose orientation with the humble, it's hard work. And I come across, I try to share my origin story, and I bring my wife in here. She'll tell you all the ways I'm not perfect. But today's the day to show up and be our best in service to something bigger than ourselves. I think that's what heroes have in common, that integrated approach. And then it's these virtues, the embodiment of wisdom, discipline, love, courage, gratitude, hope, curiosity, and zest. It's the back cover of the book. A good life is one in which we embody these. Those are my mantras that I repeat even more than Areté, thousands and thousands of times. But bless you, this has been such a joy. Really enjoyed our conversation, and just appreciate you and admire you, and yeah, grateful.
Brian, seriously, this has been amazing. We need to have conversations more often because I always love the conversations that we have. I always love talking with you. Thank you so much for coming on here and sharing your wisdom, sharing your brilliance with my audience. Thank you for writing this book. I'm going to be making this nightly reading for myself for looks like maybe the next year, with how long this book is. And, it's so dense with practical advice. It's going to take a long time to implement that stuff. I don't want it to just be intellectual ideas floating around my brain. I want it to implement it and integrate it into my life. Thank you so much for the work you're doing. I think it's really important. You are absolutely one of my favorite people in the world. Certainly one of the most favorite people that I know personally. And you're an inspiration to me, and I'm personally very grateful for you. So, to everybody listening, go get yourself this book right now. Don't wait any further. I'm sure you've been blown away by Brian in this podcast, and he has tons more wisdom to share. This is just scratching the surface. So go get his book. Brian, is there any thoughts you want to leave people with, or any final words?
Thank you. I appreciate you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. And anyone that's listened this long, I hope you enjoyed, got one idea that can help you activate your heroic potential. And yeah, I guess you can learn more about us at heroic.us. And then the book, Areté, Arete, you can find anywhere. But more than anything, just gratitude. Appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Beautiful. Thank you, brother. Hey there, this is Ari again. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, if you found it valuable, please share it with your friends, share it with your family, help me get the word out there. Also, if you're on YouTube, make sure to hit the subscribe button and hit that little bell to get notifications every time we release a new video or new episode of the podcast. And if you're listening to this, make sure to subscribe to this podcast on iTunes or on your favorite podcast app. Thanks so much for supporting my work at the Energy Blueprint. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I will see you in the next